Edwin Hardy Amies, British style icon, celebrated fashion designer, friend of the Queen, a famous name on Savile Row. But as a young man, he was also one of Britain's most unlikely spy masters, with a secret wartime past. Hardy Amies would always deny it, but now we can reveal for the first time the truth about how he masterminded a ruthless campaign of assassinations. He worked for SOE, the Special Operations Executive, Winston Churchill's secret army. Amies sent agents into occupied Belgium and played a deadly game against a brutal enemy. He worked with the resistance to eliminate whatever stood in the way of liberty, including some of the Germans' most feared agents.
Et quand il nous avait donné le nom de gens qui travaillaient pour les Allemands et qui étaient dangereux, c'était à nous de les descendre.
Now we can open the official files and show for the first time the role played by this most unlikely soldier, and just how far he was prepared to go. Hardy Amies was born in 1909 in Maida Vale, London. The son of a civil servant, his mother was a saleswoman for a clothing firm. Before the war, he worked in various fashion houses and ran a textile factory in Germany in the 1930s.
Und nun ein Wahnsinniger oder ein bewusster Lügner kann denken, Sieg heil!
There, he saw Nazism on the rise. But politics didn't interest the flamboyant fashionista. Amies was having the time of his life. His career was taking off. By 1934, he was design director at fashion firm La Chasse. And he mingled with Hollywood stars like Ginger Rogers. The one thing that risked undoing everything was his personal life. Hardy Amies was gay, something that was illegal at the time. But the war changed everything for everyone. As Britain stood alone in 1940, Hardy Amies was called up for officer training. This most unmilitary man found himself in uniform, albeit a tailored one. Soon, he was serving as a captain in the intelligence corps. Amies spoke fluent French and impeccable German, and his business skills meant he was an efficient organizer. This skill set quickly came to the attention of a shadowy organization that used the seemingly banal title of MO1-SP. But this was cover. The organization was the Special Operations Executive, or SOE. Its mission was to break all the rules of warfare. Churchill gave it the order to set Europe ablaze. Using guerrilla tactics, sabotage, and propaganda. SOE also set up resistance networks throughout occupied Europe. It employed numerous spies, saboteurs, and trained killers. Its recruits were taught to kill with their bare hands, to parachute into enemy territory, operate radios, and place explosives.
It didn't recruit in a conventional way. It chose linguists, it chose patriots, it chose people who, in the conventional jargon of today, thought outside the box. And an awful lot of people were confining their thoughts very much inside the box in the early part of the war.
Ames was just such a free thinker, and so SOE came calling. His personnel file shows what an exemplary, if particular, recruit he was. This officer has done very well on the course. He is far tougher both physically and mentally than his rather precious appearance would suggest. Then, in November 1941, he went into action. He was sent to London to work in T section of SOE. T section was in charge of Belgium. Its job was to strike at the enemy in the occupied country. Ames quickly found himself planning and executing missions into Belgium. He also supervised training and recruiting of T section agents. But Amy's flamboyant side and charm always showed through. This document lists a series of Shakespearean code names to which Ames has added, "What a wonderful cast. May I do the costumes?" Despite the levity, Ames was involved in a deadly game. He planned in detail the parachuting in of waves of Belgian agents and the clandestine landing of radio operators. Between July 1941 and October 1942, 45 agents, many selected by Ames, went into Belgium. Their mission was to make contact with men like Marcel Frankson, a young Belgian determined to strike back at Germany.
On s'est dit qu'il fallait faire quelque chose contre l'occupant. Il fallait d'une part prouver à l'occupant qu'on ne considérait pas sa victoire comme définitive, et il fallait d'un autre côté supporter le moral de la population belge.
For Marcel Frankson, taking on a ruthless, well-armed opponent was an enormous task. It was hard to know how to hit back at such an enemy, so he welcomed the help of SOE.
À partir du moment où vous avez des contacts avec le SOE par l'intermédiaire de ses agents, vous savez dans quel sens vous devez faire vos sabotages plutôt que dans un autre. C'est positif, hein?
But Hardy Ames was soon running into trouble. T-Section was finding it hard to make contact with men like Marcel Frankson. And it was dealt a number of severe blows throughout 1941 and 1942. Despite sending over 40 agents into Belgium, the section was failing. Because in Belgium, Ames faced a formidable enemy. The Germans were firmly in control. Their well-organized counter-espionage system was waiting for his agents. It excelled at catching SOE's spies and breaking up their resistance networks.
There were two main German services who were active against the networks. There was first the Abwehr, who was fighting the Allied intelligence, but there was also the Geheime Feldpolizei, who was active directly against the networks to protect the army against the spies, but also against saboteurs.
These German units were especially skilled at targeting SOE's Achilles heel, the radio, whose signals were easily intercepted and tracked. Special detection units from the secret police were listening out for SOE radio operators.
Every time you use it, you can be detected by the Funkabwehr, so the section of the Abwehr specialized in the detection of the clandestine radios. So the first radio operators were very soon arrested by the Funkabwehr.
The The Germans locked up many of these agents and radio operators here, at the notorious Saint-Gilles prison in central Brussels. The code names of the agents they caught are a roll call for the early failures of T-Section and Hardy Amies. Agent Intersection, caught March 1942. Terrier, caught April 1942. Balaclava, caught May 1942. Sometimes the Germans did something even more sinister. They turned some of these captured agents. Then, they used their radio sets to contact London and sow disinformation. One in particular would become notorious in T-Section, Armand Campion. He was used by the Germans from early 1942. He duped T-Section for months. Requests were radioed to London for more weapons, money, and agents to be sent by parachute, only to be dispatched straight into a trap. Belgium was crawling with fascist sympathizers. Volunteers ready to hunt down resistors or spies. And often, they had an added incentive: money.
C'est des gens qui faisaient ça pour de l'argent. Quand ils dénonçaient un réfractaire, ils touchaient 500 francs. Quand ils dénonçaient un résistant, ils pouvaient toucher 1000, 2000 ou 5000 francs selon l'importance de la dénonciation. Et s'ils dénonçaient un maquis, alors là, ça pouvait monter à des dizaines de milliers. S'ils parvenaient à faire prendre un maquis, ça montait à des dizaines de milliers de francs.
These paid informers caused havoc. And one Nazi sympathizer and active agent on the German payroll became infamous: Prosper de Zitter. De Zitter was the Abwehr's #1 Belgian agent. He had served in the Canadian Air Force in 1918, been charged with rape and embezzlement, and even done time in Belgium. He was a nasty piece of work. After the invasion of Belgium, he worked for the Germans, masquerading as an Allied soldier or airman. He infiltrated resistance networks and escape lines that were set up to smuggle downed aircrew and agents out of Belgium, and he was good at his job.
This man had an extraordinary capacity to inspire trust and to present himself like an authentic resistor. Some people say that because of the action of Prosper de Zitter and his collaborators, about 1,000 resistors were arrested.
Marcel Frankson's small group of resistors would encounter de Zitter to their cost.
Prosper de Zitter, nous avons eu affaire à lui 2 fois à Bruxelles.
De Zitter infiltrated an escape line that Marcel's group often used.
Cette ligne est entrée en rapport avec un certain capitaine Jackson, et c'était de Zitter. Et cette ligne a été, et ce groupe a été arrêté, et notre agent a été arrêté aussi.
Then, again in June 1943, Marcel Frankson's friends in the resistance came across de Zitter. This house in Rue Jean van Volchem in Ixelles housed another resistance cell from Frankson's group. Led by Marcel Demonceau, it was busy planning an assassination attempt on Leon de Grelle, the Belgian fascist leader. But the Germans were tipped off by de Zitter.
Ils se sont défendus, ça fait un véritable fort Chabrol dans le quartier. L'équipe qui était dans la maison lance 2 grenades. et tue un certain nombre d'Allemands.
The resulting battle went on for hours. Eventually, the Germans captured the safe house and most of the occupants. Everyone would be executed, including Marcel Demonceau, whom they captured a month later.
Cette fois-là, de Zitter est responsable de la mort de 6 ou 7 personnes, enfin.
SOE was desperate for a solution to the situation that could turn the tide, so they decided to do something about it. They planned to stage a wave of assassinations across mainland Europe, including in Belgium. In June 1943, a top-level SOE planning committee meeting took place. The men present plotted the operation and set a start date, October the 1st. Minutes from the meeting state, execution campaign. The council considered a paper recommending a concerted campaign against SS and Gestapo officials. The proposal was accepted, but should for the most part be confined to civilian officials rather than soldiers. News of the assassination operation soon began to filter through to all departments of SOE. This was Hardy Amy's chance to get de Zitter. His target would be the collaborators and sympathizers who helped the Nazis to rule. The operation was renamed Ratweek. It was ready to be put into action. A call went out to all country sections to identify targets for assassination. All Amy's had to do first was get it approved by the Belgian government in exile, led by Hubert Piellot. Piellot's government was made up of politicians who had fled their homeland in the chaos of 1940. It was bedeviled by infighting. Everyone had their own agenda. When it came to intelligence, the Belgians had 2 agencies based in London: the Sûreté, the civilian intelligence service, and its military rival, the 2e Section. All this made for confusion. Nothing could be done in Belgium without the say-so of these different groups. So Amy's turned on the charm and threw himself into the mission. Letters flew back and forth between his department and the Belgian government via its representative, Ep12. And Amy's began to show just how far he had come from flamboyant fashion designer to ruthless spy master. August 1943, copy to Ep12. It is proposed to hold a so-called Ratweek in all the occupied countries when a certain number of quislings are to disappear. Could you please create a list of possible candidates? Yours, Major H. Amy's. When the Belgians stalled, an increasingly impatient Amy's began to press for a response. Am I to understand that your authorities do not want our boys to participate? The matter is really getting very urgent. All across Europe, all other governments had granted their approval for the assassinations. Amy's was under pressure. It was about to get worse. In August, Amy's was promoted. He became acting head of T-section. With the new post, the personal burden on Amy's to get the Belgians to play ball mounted yet further. Ratweek in Belgium depended on him. At the same time, a familiar name cropped up in SOE correspondence in a letter from MI5. it ratcheted up the tension still more. The letter showed that MI5 also needed Amy's to take out De Zitter. Would you please refer to my letter of the 19th of August 1943, referring to the notorious Belgian Prosper De Zitter? I would be very interested if you would let me know how the matter now stands. In particular with regard to De Zitter and whether or not your proposed Ratweek has taken place. Then, a bombshell from the Belgian government in exile. Amy's received a letter from his Belgian contact, refusing to allow the Ratweek hits on collaborators or quislings, including De Zitter. My authority do not, for the time being, think it advisable to take special measures against Belgians collaborating with the enemy. This would involve too many difficulties. The difficulties they feared were reprisals. The Belgian government in exile feared such a bloodbath and wouldn't budge. They stuck to a belief in judicial process. Lists of traitors are being made up with a view to meting out to them their just sentence after the war. By late October, the official deadline had passed, and Amy's seemed defeated. I am sorry. The Belgian authorities will not allow us to carry out Ratweek as originally intended. It looked as if De Zitter and others like him were safe. There, the story of Ratweek appeared to end. On the surface, it seemed it had been a failure. But it appears that hardy Amy's would not let the Belgians stop him. He turned to his top agent, André J. Wendelin. Wendelin was a T-section star who had volunteered to return to Belgium. He was in Belgium on a mission with another agent, P. Liederkirk. Their mission was to establish links with Belgian resistance groups. Amy's planned to send Wendelin a top-secret weapon from SOE's inventory, one that had been specifically designed for assassination and that had been earmarked for Ratweek. It was called the Well Rod. It had been designed specifically to kill enemies of the state or anyone who was a nuisance to SOE. The pistol was affectionately known as the bicycle pump, or assassin's pistol. Critically, if it fell into enemy hands, it couldn't be traced.
The Well Rod is what's described as a sterile weapon. There were no numbers, there were no makers' names on it. There was nothing to indicate who had made it or be able to make it traceable.
The Royal Belgian Military Museum was bequeathed one of these rare weapons 20 years ago by former members of the Belgian resistance.
Yes, certainly.
The keeper of firearms, Paul Dubrenfo, shows just what a useful killing machine it really was.
The way to load a well-rod pistol is the same as for a normal so-called automatic pistol. Put from 1 to 7 cartridges in the magazine, and then put the magazine in 2 places. As you can see, the magazine is also the handle of the pistol. To load the pistol, or to make it ready to fire, just push the bolt forward, and you just turn the back of the bolt to close it completely. And handle the pistol, being sure that the safety behind the handle is well pushed forward.
The design of the Well Rod made it the perfect weapon for a discreet execution because it was silent.
The main purpose, of course, is to kill in silence. Inside the tube, you have rather important quantities of washers like that. Between the washers, you have a rubber washer. And the bullet, while passing through the holes, is, of course, leaving the barrel quicker than the sound, which is kept inside the tube. And that's the purpose of this silencer, is to delay the sounds coming out of the tube.
The choice of caliber for the well rod was also a deliberate design decision.
The 765 Browning has a muzzle speed of about 900 feet per second. And we can say that in a device like the well rod pistol, it could be subsonic. That's very important for a silenced pistol like that to be used to kill people without making too much noise.
November 1943, Ames was ready to send in the well rods. The mission was called Tybalt II. His plan was backed up by the head of operations for SOE. It is far better to send the 5 well rods and let them do what they can. A handwritten message on the back of the note makes no allusions as to what Tybalt's mission was. Tybalt, the pistols are intended for the elimination of your enemies. Let us know as soon as you have any results. Even though well rods did make it into Belgium, no one can be certain that these or later batches were used to kill collaborators. Most police records were destroyed in the last months of the war. Back in London, Ames was eager to impress his superiors. He explained that groups like the Front de l'Indépendance had been extremely busy. A Ratweek memo of the time talks of a collaborator being arrested, interrogated, and shot through the nape of the neck. Then, as Ratweek continued, even better news filtered out of Belgium. More violence and retribution had been meted out. Nazi sympathizers, pro-Nazi activists, and Rexist politicians were killed. It lists the murders. Ames was able to show more results and placed it under the heading Ratweek. It was a success for the dressmaker spy, and even when it was officially over, the killing continued. As 1943 turned to 1944, Marcel Frankson's group continued to execute any collaborators they could find.
La patrouille de garde arrête un type qui a des allures louches. Il avait à son dos une curieuse bague. On regarde de près. Il avait oublié d'enlever sa bague des Waffen-SS. C'est un type qui avait été en Russie. Inutile de vous dire que quelques heures plus tard, il était mort. Hein? Nous n'avons jamais tué de collaborateurs qui ne faisaient que de la propagande allemande. Nous n'avons jamais tué que ceux qui travaillaient directement pour la police ennemie. Et nous en avons tué 33.
Even now, decades later, Marcel Frankson feels no remorse.
Quand on sait comment la police allemande traitait les résistants, comment ils étaient torturés, la façon dont ils s'y prenaient, eh bien, on n'a pas de pitié pour ceux qui dénoncent des compatriotes comme ça et qui les livrent à l'ennemi. On n'avait absolument aucun état d'âme à le supprimer. Hein. Au contraire.
But one person who had so far managed to elude the killings was the number one target, De Zitter. However, a new SOE agent, Francois Matteau, had him in his sights. Matteau was sent to Belgium in early 1944. He was to make contact with Marcel Franksen's group and coordinate their activities. He took with him 2 weapons.
They had to choose which weapon they will bring with them. They're free to choose. And my father chose a little 380 automatic Colt because it's small and concealable, and a well rod. It was to be used to kill people because it's not a weapon for warrior, it's a weapon to eliminate something.
And so, one night, Matteau decided to make his move on De Zitte.
Because De Zitte was known as being very often in a dancing place in the center of Brussels. So it was decided to act.
They staked out the location for hours. But De Zitte never showed. It seemed De Zitte had got away with his crimes once again. Despite this, Amies and his men managed to transform the overall picture in Belgium throughout 1943 and 1944. They had turned the page on their early failures. In November 1943, Brussels newspaper vans delivered the daily editions of Le Soir. But the resistance had been at work and replaced the Nazi-sponsored edition with a resistance-printed version bearing articles ridiculing the Nazis. It was a magnificent propaganda success. Sabotage operations and armed attacks were also on the increase, and Marcel Franksen was in the thick of it.
On a fait 15 attaques surprises ou embuscades contre les colonnes allemandes. Vous mettez 2 ou 3 obus reliés par du cordeau détonnant bien caché sur le bord d'une route. Vous êtes avec votre détonateur électrique à 100 mètres de là, et au moment où un convoi passe, vous mettez le contact et vous faites sauter les obus et vous abîmez 3-4 camions de troupes, enfin. Hein. Dès que vous avez fait ça, ben vous ouvrez le feu à la mitrailleuse dessus.
Resistors blow up supplies of oil and fuel, locomotives and barges. They also blow up factories and cut communication lines. Group G, another prominent resistance organization, was especially active. Its great achievement? It sabotaged the entire Belgian high-tension electricity network. The resistance, with SOE's guidance, was managing to harass the Germans on a daily basis and turn the tables. And soon, Amies would be at the heart of one of the most successful stories of SOE wartime activity, and a masterful T-section operation. Operation Overlord was the planned Allied invasion of mainland Europe. By the summer of 1944, it was clear to everyone, even the Germans, that it was coming. So the Allied Supreme Command needed the resistance in mainland Europe to ramp up its sabotage and harassment operations behind enemy lines. In the days before D-Day, they swung into action. On June the 6th, 1944, the Allies finally attacked the beaches of Normandy. It was the greatest amphibious operation ever undertaken. In the weeks after D-Day, the Allies pushed further into France. But eventually, the advance slowed. Supplies couldn't keep up with demand. What the Allies badly needed was deep water ports.
the close of the war, the Germans instituted a program of demolitions. Their aim, as they withdrew towards the Reich, was to destroy anything that might be of use to the Allies.
This included ports and railways. In France, for example, after the Normandy landings, the retreating Germans had rendered virtually all port equipment unusable. The Allies were now vulnerable. Everything hinged on the capture of the last major port left, Antwerp.
Antwerp was critical. It was the key port. Now, if we captured Antwerp intact, if the cranes and the infrastructure was in one piece, it allowed us to reinforce the troops from Northwest Europe.
So Amies and his agents were given the mission of protecting Antwerp. T-Section was at the heart of an SOE plan called Counterscorch. Counterscorch involved using resistance groups under SOE control to prevent the destruction of this vital strategic target. Amies sent in 2 wireless operators. They helped resistance teams, notably from Group G, to defend the port. The 2 agents kept the men at the port informed and supplied with regular drops of weapons and ammunition, as well as detailed instructions. As Allied ground troops approached in early September 1944, any German attempt to destroy the cranes or docks was robustly seen off. Antwerp's port was held. It was a massive success. The saving of Antwerp port enabled supplies to continue to flow to the advancing Allied armies. Belgium was liberated in nearly a week. Now came the chance for retribution. In concert with Amies, resistance forces came out of hiding to police the handover when the Allies arrived. And the word went out to catch the wanted man, Prosper de Zitter. Amies' former foe was tracked down, imprisoned, and then executed in Brussels 4 years later. It was a triumph for Amies and the Belgian resistance. Eisenhower praised their work in an open letter. They can be justly proud of having, by their devoted heroism, contributed so largely to the liberation of their beloved homeland. Hardy Amies was now sent to Brussels. He was promoted to lieutenant colonel, and for 6 months headed an SOE mission designed to wind down the resistance networks he had helped create. It was a personal moment of glory for the dressmaker from Maida Vale. After the war, Hardy Amies went back to the glamorous world of fashion. With a wealthy co-investor, he set up the label that bears his name. Amies then penned countless designs for Queen Elizabeth II and became her couturier. But all memory of his role in Ratweek and the wider successes and failures of T-Section seemed to be conveniently forgotten. In fact, Hardy Amies rarely acknowledged his part in SOE or the details of its Belgian missions. If approached about Ratweek, he simply told people, "Sorry, old boy, I don't know anything about it." Hardy Amies was knighted in 1989, and it was only after his death that some of the truth about this dressmaker spy's surprising past began to emerge.
next Tuesday, an exclusive look at Lucky Luciano's role in winning Italy for the Americans. More brawl in the war zone when our exclusive series, Secret War, continues at 6. Next tonight to Dundee with the Antiques Roadshow.